Tell them to close these doors here. Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. What happened to the sheet? You know where to get the sheet? Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. They're in the door. Gopijana Vallabha Girivardhari. They're in the door, in the door, in the door. Yashoda Nandana Badajana Ranjana. Arjun, go get a sheet for this. Yashoda Nandana Badajana Ranjana. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jamuna Tira Vanachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Jai Mr. Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad of Divine Grace. Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. ISKCON BBT founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Purudikacharya Ashtotar to the Srimad of Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur ki jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to the assembled devotees. All glory to Shri Guru and Gauranga. Okay, now let's just find out where we are. There's no marker in here. But I know we're somewhere in the middle of chapter 9. We read that one, I remember that. Did we read 18? We must have read 18. Yeah, I think we 19. I believe so. About I am heat, I'm withheld and sent forth.
Page 362.
No. Chapter 9, text 20, I believe.
400, page 400.
Yeah. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. All right, let's do 19 because I'm not sure. All right. On this 12th day of December 2022 in San Diego, we're reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita as it is, translation and commentary by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. And we are in chapter 9 entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge, text 19 at the top of page 400. Tapami aham barsham nigviksnami utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna. Pajumna Prabhu. Tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna. Tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna. Vṛndāvana. Tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna. Anyone else want to try? Go ahead. Tapamyaham varsham nigviksnam utsujami cha amitam chaiva mrityuscha sadasat chaham Arjuna. Word by word. Tapami, give heat. Aham, I. Varsham, rain. Nigviksnami, withhold. Utsujami, send forth. Cha, and. Amritam, immortality. Cha, and. Eva, certainly. Mrityuhu, death. Cha, and. Sat, spirit. Asat, matter. Cha, and. Aham, I. Arjuna, O Arjun. O Arjun, I give heat, and I withhold and send forth the rain. I am immortality, and I am also death personified. Both spirit and matter are in me. Purport. Krishna, by his different energies, diffuses heat and light through the agency of electricity and the sun. During the summer season, it is Krishna who checks rain from falling from the sky. And then, during the rainy season, he gives unceasing torrents of rain. The energy which sustains us by prolonging the duration of our life is Krishna. And Krishna meets us at the end as death. By analyzing all these different energies of Krishna, one can ascertain that for Krishna there is no distinction between matter and spirit. Or in other words, he is both matter and spirit. In the advanced stage of Krishna consciousness, one therefore makes no such distinctions. He sees only Krishna in everything. Since Krishna is both matter and spirit, the gigantic universal form comprising all material manifestations is also Krishna. And his pastimes in Vṛndāvana as two-handed Śyāmasundara playing on a flute are those of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisance unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara, the disciplic succession. So, this is part of a list that we sometimes encounter in the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna is pointing out things that we experience every day. Like in the 7th chapter, you may recall, Rasoham, Apsukondeya, Babasmi, Sachi Suryava. I am the taste of water, I am the light of the sun and the moon, I am the ability in man, I am the fragrance of the earth. All these things that we encounter all the time, and we generally don't connect them to God. He is saying, no, through my energies, because he just, in the 7th chapter, he just finished listing the material energies, which we live with every day. Earth, water, fire, air, ether. This is, earth means solid matter, liquids, gases, and then the finer things, the mind, intelligence, ego, these are all energies, subtle energies. We all know we have a mind, we can't see it, we can't smell it, can't taste it, but we definitely have one. Right? It's a very important part of our being. So Krishna is saying, these are all my energies. He says, aparayam itastvanyam. The apara means inferior energies. They're not alive, they're not conscious. But they're around us all the time. He says, these are coming from me. They're my energies, my energies. But there's also the para prakriti, the higher energy, the transcendental energy, which consists of us. The jivas, the spirit within matter. So everything we see is a combination of spirit and matter. Even it seems like, oh, where's the spirit in a mountain or a stone? Yes, that's the earth energy, there's a Bhumi energy, and there is a god, Mother Bhumi, who is in charge of that energy. Varun is in charge of the water, and Surya is in charge of the sunlight. Every material energy has a conscious being behind it who's running the show. And above all of them is Krishna. He's giving the demigods the power to help run the universe. But all of this is invisible to us. We generally just look to nature. If you want to find out, well, how's a car running? Oh yeah, you've got to go to an expert mechanic. Right, he can tell you just how it used to be. Do they still have carburetors? I don't think they even have carburetors anymore. But there's a certain way, and this is what happens. But then probably, yeah. But behind all of it is the driver, right? If the driver isn't there, then nothing happens. Right? There's always the idea is there's always a conscious being behind all activities. Ultimately, even now they have the artificial intelligence is becoming more prominent, where they can create robots that almost act just like people, right? And they seem to have emotions, and they've certainly produced them that they can beat any human being in chess and all these things now, But behind the robot, there's a big brain of someone who figured out how to program the computer. There's really no living entity there, but there is within our machine. This is simply a machine. And the 15th chapter, Krishna, I think it is, no, I'm sorry, 18th chapter. Prabhupada quotes this verse all the time. Ishvarak savabhutanam vidyar sherdunatishthiti brahmayan savabhutani yantra rudani mayaya. This is Krishna. It's very interesting because throughout the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes Krishna speaks as the personality of Godhead. I am the source of everything, it says in the 10th chapter. But then he'll also go into the third person. He'll say, the Ishvara, Well, aren't you the Ishvara? But he's speaking. No, the Ishvara means the super soul within every heart. Sarva Bhutanam Hriddeshe. Hrid means heart. Hriddeshe anatishtati. Brahmayan Sarvabhutani. They're all wandering throughout the universe. And not only throughout the universe, but within different species. In other words, when we leave this human body, we may not take another human body. Depending on our work, depending on our karma. But we'll be animating that dog's body, you know. We'll forget all about this body. And once you're in that body, you got to act just like a dog. Yeah? So this has been going on for a long, long time. But behind all of it, where is the big brain that's organized all of this incredible world? You know, I don't know if you all had this experience, but I grew up in New York State, and sometimes we go into camp, into the out in the country, you know. And suddenly we're out of the city, out of the suburbs, which is also near the city, but you see all those stars, and you look up and there's this Milky Way, and you wonder, whoa, that's an incredible display. You know, what's out there? Where's it? You know, and so now, and then of course over the years they built up stronger and stronger telescopes to be able to penetrate even more. But isn't it the thing that's really we should be thinking about is look at all of the incredible patterns. And I remember wondering when I first experienced a solar eclipse, full solar eclipse when I was a kid. Maybe I was 10 years old, you know. Okay, be sure to, you know, you look through the smoky glass or whatever it was, you know, don't look directly at it. You know. But then you'd see that the moon, right, it comes across the sun and blocks it perfectly. Just the right size. So there's a penumbra there, but it's not like, you can see that, it's not too big, it's not too small. I said, that's pretty amazing. That's quite a coincidence that it's just the right size. You know, I didn't come to the point, there must be a divine being behind that. But it kind of intrigued me that things was so wonderfully organized that just fit perfectly to give you the penumbra. So that's really the way it is. I remember I used to work with Sariputta, who was our main scientist. I was working on the BI, and we lived with him in Philadelphia. And he was living in the same house, and I was working with Bhakti Godhead. He would write articles, you know. And he wrote the paper. The first thing he wrote for this Bhaktivedanta Institute, which Srila Prabhupada established in 1977, was a paper called Proof from Information Theory that Life Cannot Arise from Matter. And it was one of these, you know, if you open it up, you say, well, I can't understand all that. It's full of all these equations. Have you ever seen advanced mathematics? You know, it's really tough. But he specialized in information theory. Now, what is information theory? Information theory is a way of figuring out the organization or the patterns in any specific unit of existence. And somehow he worked out this calculations for figuring out the amount of information in the universe, or maybe the solar system, or something like that, you know. And he proved, you know, mathematically that it's just too much to have arisen by chance, no matter how long it is. Our own body itself is so wonderfully put together that to try to think, oh, it just came up from paramecium and simple one-cell organisms. I remember there was a pamphlet, not a pamphlet, a magazine we put out once called Origins. Remember that one? And there, Sariputta, he pointed out, there was a little half on the article, how the old simple one-cell paramecium is not so simple after all. When you get down into the intricacies of it, he said something that just blew your mind. It's more complicated than New York City. The things that are going on. There are no such things as simple one-cell organisms. They're not simple. So the whole point is that you have to practically be willfully blind not to accept that there is an organizing intelligence behind this universe, behind everything that's going on. And Krishna is directly saying here that this heat, it's coming from me. I am the heat. That it is my energy. The rain is my energy. All of this is coming from me. Without my existence, it's not going to happen. And eventually we know from the Bhagavatam, I don't think it mentions here, that everything is wound up at one point. right? At a certain point, it doesn't really exist in all this differentiation. It's all this, the Mahatattva, and all the living entities, including us, if we're not back to Godhead, we're in a state of suspended animation within Mahavishnu. We don't have bodies, we don't have thoughts, we don't have activities, but we have our latent karma there, and when the creation takes it, we start again and we go on. So the whole point here is, in this chapter, is that if we're intelligent, we will worship Krishna. We will try to align our activities with his desires. That's what it comes down to at the end. Manmana bhava madbhakto madhyati mam namaskuru. That's the last verse in this chapter. So think of me, become my devotee, bow down to me, worship me. Surely you will come to me. Not because you're my best friend, that's in the 18th chapter, but because you'll be linked to me in yoga constantly, you know. And that's really should be the goal of our life, to try to end this long sojourn in the material world, characterized by birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death, again and again and around. We never die. The soul never dies. The soul simply, the bodies that we're inhabiting certainly die, because they're complicated machines, and machines eventually wear out. Would you like a book? You should need a Bhagavad Gita. Yeah, there's so many.
There is a seat chair. Can sit there.
Maybe she might want to it sounds like she wants to sit on a. Yeah, but there's a bench. So many benches. So that should be our first consideration. If we understand the first lesson of Bhagavad Gita, that this body we have now is a very short chapter in a very long book. It's distinct, and but it's a special gift, the human life, special gift. Labdvasu durlamamidham bahusambhavante manushyamārtatamanicchamapi adhira tunam yateta napatena namityavad nikshayasaya vishayakavasarvatakshyat. But this verse is, I think, spoken by Krishna in the 11th canto in his Uddhava Gita. You have attained a very rare human life, labdva sudurlabham, idam, after many other births, evolving through the different species. And manusham, human form, the same word practically. Artadam, very important word. The word arta means something of value in Sanskrit. It often means wealth. But there's a word called svarta, which means swa-arta, the goal of the soul, your actual supreme goal that you should have, the most intelligent aspiration you should have. Because everything else, if it's just related to the body, ultimately is frustrated. You're defeated by time. But this self-realization, God-realization, breaking free from birth and death, this is what the soul can achieve. And so only in the human form do we have the intelligence to reflect upon these things and to control the lower self with the higher self. The animals are more or less just working by instinct. You can't get a dog to sit, could you please sit on this side? This is the side for the dogs. No, they'll sit wherever they want if they happen to wander in the temple, right? And even if they're there quiet for a while, they're not really understanding. And a lot of times even you can see like human beings aren't understanding, what to speak of animals. So it's just not available. But as human beings, if we apply our intelligence, the way Prabhupada presented it, and Bhagavad Gita is really like the ABCs, we can understand the first lesson. And if you understand the first lesson, it should completely reset your whole aspiration, idea. Because if you say, well, dehi nosmin yata dehe, Komaram yovanam jara, tata dehantaram papde dhiras tattanamuyati. This is like the third verse in his instructions. So he says, just as in this body, forget about next body or previous body, just in this body, as the soul passes from childhood to youth, adolescence, middle age, old age, right? In other words, we can all reflect. You haven't reached the middle age yet, or old age. But you can remember when you were 5, right? 5, 10, right? So we had a different body. All of us, we had a different mind, but we're the same person. That's how we can remember. I was doing that. If our parents are alive, they'll remember. Yeah, you used to do that. So the body is changing, but we're staying the same. We're the same person. I feel like I'm the same person I was when I was 10 years old. But everything has changed. So I'm not the body. I'm the person who knows the body. Kshetrajñā, Krishna says in the 13th chapter. The knower of the field of the body. And that knower of the field of the body is eternal. That's this main verse in the 2nd chapter. The Jayate, Mriyate, Vakadacha. And this verse is also there in the Upanishads. Almost identical. For the soul, there's never birth nor death at any time. It doesn't come into being, has not come into being, will not come into being. We're eternal. Just as eternal as Krishna. Ajo, Nitya, Shashrata, Yamparan, he just pounds it in. Unborn, eternal, ever existing, and primeval. The soul is not slain when the body is slain. We're all slain eventually by time. Something gives out, or whatever, we have an accident. Somehow or other, the machine stops working. But we're not dead. What happens to us? That's nicely explained beginning of the 15th chapter. The subtle body, you have to understand we have two basic bodies. We have this outer body, which we call the body. But we also have a mental body, the mind, intelligence, and ego. That doesn't die. When this gross body dies, that doesn't die. And all the impressions and all the aspirations and all the fears that you experience, you carry those with you if they're deep in your subconscious. And those will also go into determining what your next body is going to be. And there's also higher powers that are deciding. Yes, we just finished in the Srimad Bhagavatam the story of a Jamil. Jamil was a nice Brahmin who was very dutiful. He was out in the forest and gathering wood for the sacrifice. This is a standard menial service that up-and-coming Brahmins do. And he saw something that you can see every day today, everywhere. A low-class couple having sex in the forest. He lost it. He just couldn't control his mind. And so he married it was a prostitute. Then he married a prostitute. He ignored his wife. He let her go. He had a very nice chaste wife. And he became very sinful. He was cheating and robbing and doing anything. And so he lived the whole life that way. So he's sinful, a lot of sin. So there's this process. The previous chapter is pretty hair-raising. We don't have the fire and brimstone like sermons like you find. But this is our fire and brimstone chapter. There's a variety of hells that are described there, and these are just a sampling, And if you do this, the one that really just makes my skin crawl all the time, because I grew up near New York City, and in New York City there's all of these fancy restaurants, So we would go into the city. We didn't have money to go to the fancy restaurants, but we would walk down Broadway or Fifth Avenue, whatever it was, and then you see in the windows, you would see they're advertising lobster. It's a real delicacy. And so they'd have this poor lobster in there. He's still alive. They'd have him in a little fish tank, And the understanding is, yes, you can pick out which lobster you like, and we'll take him and we'll throw him in hot water. Boiling water. Can you imagine? There's a special hell for someone who eats like that. I never had lobster in my life. Maybe that's why.
That's the hell when we were kids in India.
Yeah.
That's the only hell they tell us.
They tell you about that one? But there are all a bunch of other ones described. So the idea is that, you can suffer those, but you won't suffer in your physical body. You won't die there because you're in your subtle body. But it feels like, millions of years you're suffering these things, thrown off a mountain or, illicit sex. You have to embrace a hot iron, molten iron figure of the opposite sex for 1 million years. Okay, isn't that enough to? but the thing is, it's in your subtle body. So time doesn't. Meanwhile, you're going to your next body, but it seems like 10 million years and you were in this hell. This is what's going on. So then you go to the 6th chapter. It's all about the glories of the holy name, chanting. This is a great inducement to chant Hare Krishna. Because if you chant a little Hare Krishna, anyone who's here, you must have chanted Hare Krishna even a little bit. Right, Natalie? Okay, so you're saved. You won't go to hell. That's what he says. But it really helps if you can do it when you're leaving your body. So that's what you have to train between now and when that time comes, So anyway, the idea is that whatever if we're in ignorance, it's a great danger. The greatest danger is to be in ignorance. But we shouldn't have this book on the seat where people sit. Yeah, sorry. Ignorance is such a dangerous thing because you're not aware. Just like this pandemic, right? The whole day they were trying to pound it. Yes, you have to do this because you can't see the danger, but it's there, and the hospitals are filling up. So you should do this, and that, therefore the vaccines are there, and all this, and it's there. So put on the mask, right? So the knowledge, it's not something that you can see through your senses, but the danger is obviously there. So similarly, the danger of acting in such a way that you're going to lose the human form of life is there, but we can't see it, we can't intuit it, discover it on our own, and so we need teachers such as Srila Prabhupada, we need books such as the Bhagavad Gita. The whole thing, Prabhupada, he sacrificed so much just to help us, give us a chance to translate all this into English. Believe me, I know the trouble. I worked on book production for 50 years now, since the mid-70s. And I know what it took. Prabhupada, he knew English, but he knew that it needed a lot of work, and he had Sanskrit people helping him and putting it all together. Why? Not to make money. He's living as a sannyasi. He's doing it for us, to give us a chance to get knowledge so that we can change our behavior and benefit. At least avoid the worst aspects of the material world and gradually purify ourselves so we can escape entirely. Go back home, back to Godhead. No more birth, no more death. Yad-gad bhananavartante dhamma padamang mama. Krishna says in the 15th chapter, I think it is. There's not much description about the spiritual world here in the Bhagavad Gita. There's quite a bit in the Bhagavatam. We have so much in other literatures. But there he says, Natad bhasiyate suryo nasashanko napavaka yadgadbanadavartante dhamma padamangama. In that spiritual world, there's no need of sunlight or moonlight because everything is self-effulgent. If you want a more detailed description, this describes in the Brahma Samhita. What does it say there? He says, Shriya kanta kanta padama purusha kalpatadavo dhuma bhumi chindamanagannamahi toyamamatam kata ganam natyam kamanam apivangshi priyasaki chadanandam jyoti padamapitadasvajamapicha. Which means that there in the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, Krishna's consort is the goddess of fortune, and he's the supreme male there. Kanta padama purusha kalpa dadava. All the trees are desire trees. You can go to the apple tree, but you say, I don't want apples. Can I have mangoes? And the tree will give you some mangoes. It's fully conscious. It's fully conscious as we are, but it wants to be a tree. And all of the walking, there's no walking there, it's all dancing. There's no talking, it's all singing. And one can always hear that flute sound in the background. And everything is glowing with chidananda, with spiritual glow. And you say, you can taste it. Chidananda, it's blissful. You see. And then the next verse, I won't go into the Sanskrit, it says, not a second passes away there. There's no time. You don't degenerate. It's not, the time is not pushing you toward destruction. There's no old age, no disease or death. There's no future, there's no path, it's only eternal present. And everything is ever fresh and ever new. And don't get bored and say, well, I want to try something else. Huh?
Intelligent bodies there?
I'm sorry?
So like Krishna is intelligence, right? In Vaikuntha. Our bodies also get like that?
We have purely spiritual body. Yes, Satchidananda bodies. We also have purely spiritual bodies. That's our eternal. But because we're minute and we're infinitesimal, we have the tendency to be covered by the material energy. Krishna doesn't have that tendency. But if we align our consciousness with his, we become pure, then we can also regain that original state. Each of us has a pure spiritual form that we don't know now because we get entangled in the material energy. We have these forms. But we have our perfect form to serve just the mood that we want. We may be a coward friend, we may be a parent, we may be a lover, we may be even a cow, and happy in that form, fully conscious, just as intelligent, but we like to serve in that way. Krishna loves those cows. There's so many pastimes with that. So anyway, that's the ultimate goal. But the preliminary goal which we can really relate to, is, yes, I would like to be free of disease, old age, and death and rebirth. You know, I would like to be free of old age. I'm old now, you know, and things don't work as well as they used to. You know, I'd like to have, you know, a nice young body in the spiritual world. But so here he's simply saying, I give it, I withhold. And so Krishna is behind all of the things in the material world. Now the next two verses are really important because they should discourage us from trying to go to the heavenly planets, where you can live for so many years and enjoy godly delights. But it also, time eventually takes away and you have to come back down here. So let's read text 20. Travidya mam somapa putta papa Yajñāristva swargatim prarthayante Te punyamasad sudendra lokam Ashnanti divyan divideva bhogan. Those who study the Vedas and drink the Soma juice, seeking the heavenly planets, worship me indirectly. Purified of sinful reactions, they take birth on the pious heavenly planet of Indra, where they enjoy godly delights. Purport. The word Trividya refers to the three Vedas, Sama, Yajur, and Rig. A Brahmin who has studied these three Vedas is called a Trivedi. Anyone who is very much attached to knowledge derived from these three Vedas is respected in society. Unfortunately, there are many great scholars of the Vedas who do not know the ultimate purport of studying them. Therefore, Krishna herein declares himself to be the ultimate goal of the Trivedis. Actually, Trivedis take shelter under the lotus feet of Krishna and engage in pure devotional service to satisfy the Lord. Devotional service begins with the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra and side by side trying to understand Krishna in truth. Unfortunately, those who are simply official students of the Vedas become more interested in offering sacrifices to the different demigods like Indra and Chandra. By such endeavor, the worshippers of different demigods are certainly purified of the contamination of the lower qualities of nature and are thereby elevated to the higher planetary systems or heavenly planets known as Maharloka, Janaloka, Tapoloka, etc. Once situated on those higher planets, on those higher planetary systems, one can satisfy his senses hundreds of thousands of times better than on this planet. Well, that sounds exciting. I mean, you know, you can get some sense gratification here, but can you imagine if it was 100,000 times better, you know? That sounds attractive. Let's go for it, right? So Krishna, he describes it, but in the next verse he throws the cold water on it. So let's read the...
Quick question.
Yeah.
So Christians indirectly talk about these planets?
You know, I don't think so, because they're always talking that God is there. They think God is there. It's a vague conception. I don't think they really understand. Because really in the heavenly planets, I mean, Nanda gardens, you know, Indra's there, it's a place of enjoyment. And it's not so much that you're serving God, you're just cavorting with, you know, the nymphs there, you know, for a long, long time. You're cashing in on all the piety that you accrued from acting strictly according to the Vedas, performing the sacrifices, all these different things, you know. But it's all material, and therefore it's temporary. And Krishna will make it very clear in the next verse. Te tam bhuktva sargalokam vishalam Chine punye matyalokam vishanti Evam chahi dharmam anupapanna Gatagatam kama kama labhante. When they, the worshippers who have gone to heaven, when they have thus enjoyed vast heavenly sense pleasure, and the results of their pious activities are exhausted, they return to this mortal planet again. Thus those who seek sense enjoyment by adhering to the principles of the three Vedas achieve only repeated birth and death. Purport. One who is promoted to the higher planetary systems enjoys a longer duration of life and better facilities for sense enjoyment. Yet one is not allowed to stay there forever. one is again sent back to this earth upon finishing the resultant fruits of pious activities. He who has not attained perfection of knowledge, as indicated in the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadhyasya Yataha, or in other words, he who fails to understand Krishna, the cause of all causes, becomes baffled about achieving the ultimate goal of life, and is thus subjected to the routine of being promoted to the higher planets and then again coming down, as if situated on a Ferris wheel which sometimes goes up and sometimes goes down. The purport is that instead of being elevated to the spiritual world, from which there is no longer any possibility of coming down, one simply revolves in the cycle of birth and death on higher and lower planetary systems. One should better take to the spiritual world to enjoy an eternal life full of bliss and knowledge, and never return to this miserable material existence. So that's Krishna's verdict. We heard, I think, some of this in the 7th chapter, that it's really foolish to try to aspire for anything material, because the nature of things material, it's asat, which means it's temporary. You know the famous call, I remember I learned this before I even heard of the Hare Krishnas. Asato ma satgamaya, tamasi ma jyotirgamaya, amrityu ma amitam gamaya. There's two ways of reading. Prabhupada would always think of the ma, meaning don't. You know, no, don't do it. Don't stay in the darkness, come to the light. Don't stay in the birth and death, and come to the eternal life. And don't stay in temporary matter, come to the eternal reality. So asato, this is the word of asat. This is this world that we're in now. It's constantly changing. Sometimes it's called the bhavasagara, the ocean of change. Birth, old age, disease, and death. Birth, old age, disease, and death. Those are the main changes we go through. But that world of change means that there's no security here. Whatever we try to establish, and we think, now finally, you know, I've got my own home. This is like the American dream, right? You know, got my own home and everything. But now climate change, you know, there's got some huge flood is coming. I mean, we're witnessing it every day, right? It's a tremendous lesson, this climate change thing, because what is it caused by? It's caused by so many, you know, burning all these fossil fuels and creating all these greenhouse gases, you know. And they've known about this for 40 years. In the 80s, this one guy went to Congress and he testified, you know, this is not going to work, putting out all this carbon dioxide, you know. It's like, and but they can't stop, because that's what it depends on, is the energy, and there's no way that they can fast enough create the electric. You know, it's not going to. That lifestyle has to change. Lifestyle has to change, and that's what they don't hear. So this is just like a huge example of what we do as human beings. We ignore all of this knowledge, and we try to make a situation in this temporary world that's temporary and secure and full of happiness. But it's impossible, because of the force of time, because of the temporary nature of the body, because of the ever-changing asat life, temporary life. So therefore, how do we go from the sat to from the asat to the sat? This is the injunction of the Vedanta Sutta. It said you should. It says Tato Brahma Jigyasa. Now that you're a human being, you should inquire into Brahman, which is the sat, the eternal, the conscious, source of everything. That's what it is. If you're not inquiring into that, there's a million different things you can inquire into. But ultimately, you'll be frustrated in your hopes for happiness and security. So, Krishna here, it was 2 verses, he should have convinced us all not to try for the heavenly planets. And that's the whole section of the Vedas deals with that. They call it the Karma Kanda section. It's a pious way of living, performing sacrifice and charity and all these things with the hopes that you'll go to the heavenly planets. And then you really cash in, Indraloka, all right. Nanda Gardens, I've made it, right? People come, oh, finally I made it, I moved to San Diego. That's the poor man's heavenly planet, right? But but it's always frustrated. You learn, you can see this over time. When you get old, you can see it. I mean, as a devotee, I could look back on what my life could have been or would have been if I wasn't a devotee. I wouldn't have lived nearly this long. But and you see, it's such a tragic thing, and this is one of the reasons why devotees want to preach. Prabhupada was so eager, because it doesn't have to be that way. The simple process of bhakti. No one here has performed really, really, really serious austerities in order to come and sit in Bhagavad Gita class. And if, oh my God, what's the main thing you do? It must be really hard. No, you just chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare. Was that so hard? No. It's been made easy for this age. Especially Lord Chaitanya's come. What is that? Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam kalo nastyeva, nastyeva, nastyeva gataranyata. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age, when dissension and chaos abound, that's Kali. Kali means fight. It's imbalance even more than other ages. If you want to achieve the supreme goal of life in this age when dissension and chaos abound, there is no other way, there is no other way, there is no other way that can ever be found but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name, but to chant Krishna's name with a stout-hearted bow and to pray, O Lord Krishna, O friend of the poor, let my head ever unto your lotus feet bow. So that's the simple way in which Krishna is ultimately saying, just think of me, become my devotee, and the best way to do that is to take up the chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra. It really, such a relief. To be honest, all these years, 50 years, almost 50 years now, I've been in this movement, and I'm just thank Prabhupada every day, to save me from all the confusion and the craziness and the thing that, the drugs and oh my God. Yeah, who needs all that? Especially, the thing is, the aesthetics, the wonderment of Krishna consciousness. I'll give you just a couple examples here, because, our authors, our previous acharyas, I was just exploring some songs, Sanskrit songs by Jiva Goswami in the Gopal Champu. The Gopal Champu is a wonderful book that expands on Krishna's Leela from Vṛndāvana. It gives so many more details. So this is I'll give you one or two verses from this song. This is based on chapter 21 of the 10th canon, which is the famous Venu Gita, where the gopis are singing of Krishna as he goes into the forest and remembering him that way. And so one of the verses goes like this. And I always think of the deities in Alachua because they installed these beautiful Krishna Balaram deities there a few years ago. Breathtaking. I have some pictures I can share one of these nights. So this is how the Krishna and Balaram are walking into the forest, and the gopis are singing this song. And they sing like this: Mala mala padimala vali vali vapadali valadasadesham alijankitinakola halabahabalakatu helavesham. They all rhyme. They have this wonderful meter. So mala mala means both Krishna and Balaram are wearing these beautiful garlands of forest flowers, very, very fragrant, reaching down to their knees. And as they walk, their mothers have applied to, just like every morning. Remember, we have that little Q-tip, we get the little oil, right, that they offer if you're in Mangalarti. So that's a little reflection of there's an instrument called the Vali. Vali normally means some kind of a wrinkle you have, but it's not appropriate here. It's a vali where the mothers apply the different fragrant oils to different parts of their body. So now you've got the garlands, and you've got those oils, emitting all this wonderful, exquisite fragrance, plus the natural fragrance of their body. So you can imagine what the bees are experiencing. The bees are going mad. The bumblebees, they're attracted to the fragrance. So wherever the boys are, there's these swarms of bees. And they're not just humming and buzzing, they're certainly not stinging. But they're singing. They're not stinging, they're singing. What are the Ali means bees. With great enthusiasm and very loudly, they're singing different stotras, different verses about Krishna and Balaram. It's a spiritual world. The bees are fully as conscious as the human beings. So they have this scene, and they're being glorified by the bees as they go along. And the song goes on. Each verse is about 6 or 8 verses. So this is the aesthetics of how the acharyas have written about these and given us these wonderful expressions, and the Bhagavatam is just filled with wonderful verses. You can if you're getting it, you're chanting and you're getting a pleasure from serving Krishna, then when you glorify him, it's extremely pleasurable because he loves to be glorified that way. So that's why chanting his holy name is so potent, because it's very pleasing to him that this long lost soul is finally thinking of me and glorifying me and associating with me in the form of my holy name. It's all extremely esoteric, but it's a fact, and it works. And anyone who experiences, I'm not a pure devotee, but I can. But even whatever I've experienced and am experiencing, you can see that it's so much far beyond the madness that's going on out there. It's just a great refuge Srila Prabhupada has provided. So, any other comments on these two verses? Tomorrow we'll study the Krishna resolves that ananyaschintayantam mam. Those who just think of me, I provide what they need, preserve what they have. Go ahead.
I have a question. What is the Vedanta Sutra?
Vedanta Sutra.
Yes.
Yeah. Give the question again.
What is the Vedanta Sutra?
What is Vedanta?
Vedanta.
Yeah. Veda means knowledge, and anta means end or conclusion. So Vedanta sutras are little aphorisms. Like I gave you one, Janma Yasya Yataha. Very short, right? But it's full of meaning, but it requires some explanation because it's like a code, So that's the first one. It says, now therefore. Now how do you begin a book with the word therefore? So the implication is this is the end of all of the Vedas. You've read through the Vedas and all the Puranas and everything in the Upanishads. Now here's the conclusion. So now therefore, having read all that and being a human being, you should inquire, atato brahma jigyasa. Jigyasa means to be curious. Now you should be curious about the absolute truth, Brahman, the spirit that from which everything has come. That's the next sutra. And it goes on with the sutras, and there's a commentary has been written. And it's a long history. An impersonal commentary was written about it, of it. But Lord Chaitanya didn't feel that there needs to be a Gaudiya Vaishnava commentary because the Srimad Bhagavatam is a natural commentary. The Srimad Bhagavatam, which we have, I don't know if you're familiar with it. That's another book.
Okay.
Yeah. Long book, 18 long volumes. Yeah. Oh. So the idea is that the ultimate truth, the ultimate source of everything, is a person, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And that our mission in life should be to know Him and to serve Him, and in this way to perfect our lives, to end our birth, death, old age, and disease, and be reinstituted in our original place in the spiritual world. That's what Vedanta Sutra is. And isn't it interesting? Srila Prabhupada's name is A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami. His very name gives the conclusion. What's the Vedanta? What's the end of all knowledge? Bhakti. Love of God. Loving service to God. That's the end of it. All right. There's time for one more poem. Now this is a poem I wrote. It's called The Fall and Redemption of the Soul. Some of you may not have heard this one yet. Where Krishna lives, felicity abounds. With pure simplicity and loving sensibility, all serve Him with humility. But when a living entity rejects his true identity and out of sheer stupidity surrenders to cupidity, he loses all sagacity and with it all capacity to understand reality or curb his sensuality. Abandoning humility, he touts his own ability, forgetting his fragility and fortune's volatility. Immersed in asininity for what seems an infinity of lives devoted to piety, he suffers an anxiety till contact with God's devotee, perhaps of utmost brevity, awakens his affinity for words of the divinity. Perceiving the futility of all his imbecility, the soul regains his sanity and casts away his vanity. Endowed with new humility, he serves with all ability and growing spontaneity his guru and the deity. Regaining his identity, the wayward living entity returns to the fraternity of Krishna for eternity. So that's where we're on that upward swing now. All glory to Srila Prabhupada. We'll convene again tomorrow at the same place. You're all welcome.